So this is step one for the multi-step project that we're going to be doing for this animation week. And if you haven't already watched the intro video for this project, please do so. This is step one, but I'm going to be trying to not reintroduce the project in every one of these steps to save time for everybody. So you're not really going to have any idea what this is about if you don't watch the intro video about this project, and also make sure to read the assignment details for this week's module. So what we're going to be doing for this first step is we're going to be taking the video that we've selected to use for this animation, and then I'm going to be showing everyone how to pull the frames out of the video and essentially convert the video into still frames that you're going to be basing your animation on and basing this project on. So I'm going to be showing everyone how to do this first with Photoshop, and then I am also going to be showing people how to use an alternative method if, one, you can't get Photoshop to work. I wanted everyone to be able to get a little bit farther with this project, even if you're having severe technical issues. So there is another way, but it's going to be a lot more streamlined if you can do it in Photoshop. I also want to give the people who are working with a different image editor potentially, and if this feature isn't something that's in that other image, that alternative image editor, I want to show another way to do this. But Photoshop makes it really easy, so I'm also going to show that. And let's do that now. So I have Photoshop open, and this is going to be a really quick process. Again, Photoshop makes it very easy to convert videos into still frames, and to also do it in a way that is very technically based. So it takes some of the guesswork that is actually involved if you're using an alternative method. But I'll get into that in the next video. First, I want to show everyone how to do this with Photoshop. So I have the video that I'm going to be basing my animation on. It's on my desktop, and I want to make sure that I know where that is. So those of you, well, everyone should be using a video that you've downloaded from the site. We have selected a couple of different videos to use, and that's because they're the right length. They show the kind of motion that we're looking for. And so just make sure that you have that video saved on your computer and that you know where it is. All right, so I'm going to go up here. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm actually, instead of opening it in Photoshop, and you can open videos in Photoshop, but they don't open in the way that we are going to be using them ultimately for this project. I'm going to go down to Import, and then I'm going to select Video Frames to Layers. All right, and so I know where this is, and it pops up in the folder that I had selected previous to this when I tested this. So for those of you that haven't done this yet, you're probably not going to be seeing the video right in the first screen, so you're going to have to look for it. If you saved it on the desktop, you can go over here, and I think that there's like a Windows equivalent to that. But yeah, so mine happened to be open, so I'm going to say select. I'm going to select that video and open it, and then I'm also going to get some options that come up. And this is a really important dialog box, and there's going to be a little bit of math that I've tried to put up here that everyone's going to have to do in order to fine-tune this conversion process. So range to import from beginning to end is fine because, again, you're all using videos that we've selected, and they're all an acceptable amount of time for this project. But you are going to have to select this, which is limit to every, and then there's a blank frame. So I'm going to come over here and select this box, and when I check that box, you'll see I can choose how many frames it's going to convert into still images. So this is where this math comes into play. Hopefully you read the intro, hopefully you watched the intro and you read the assignment details before, so you know that I'm going to be asking everyone to create a 2-second animation that is 12 frames per second. So what that means is that you're going to be having to create 24 frames to fill in that animation for 2 seconds. So from this video, or for whatever video you're choosing, you're actually going to be wanting to pull out 24 frames to then base your animation on. Okay, so how the heck do we do that? Hooray, math. Okay, so you know the length in seconds, and I think most of these are between 2 and 10 seconds. And so for this one, I know that the original length of this video is 6 seconds. So I'm going to, first I want to find out how many frames there are in this video. And to do that, I'm going to multiply the length in seconds by 30. And 30 is based on the frames per second of most videos that are posted on the web and most video and digital video in general. It's usually 29.97 frames per second. And that's the reason why there's that weird decimal is because it's based on 30 frames per second, but because of the way that the images sometimes are compressed and the frames are compressed, you get a little bit of a fraction because they do this thing where they kind of chop off the last pixels, the last grouping of pixels from one frame, and then they overlay it. So you have these, you get these decimal numbers. It's not really important. And just to expedite this, I just say multiply by 30, and that's going to tell you, so you know if your video is 6 seconds, and then you multiply it by 30 because there's 30 frames of video in every single, or sorry, there's 30 frames of images, so 30 little images in every second of video. So I'm going to use my calculator here. It's also a phone. It's amazing. So I know that in this video that I'm trying to convert into frames, that there are originally roughly 180 frames that make up this video. So next, so I know that there's 180 frames, but I want to get that down to 24 frames because that's how many frames I'm going to be animating to create my 2-second animation. So I'm going to then divide that number, so 180, I'm going to divide that by 24. And so that goes, so 24 goes into 180, it's a decimal, so I have 7.5. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to round that up, so I'm going to limit, so every 8 frames. So what this does, instead of 7.5, I'm putting in every 8 frames. So what this tells Photoshop is instead of it bringing in 180 frames, and that's going to be way too many, especially for this project, to be basing a drawing on each of those 180 frames, I just wanted to find how many times 24, which is the number of frames I'm going to need ultimately for this animation, goes into that 180 frames. And then, yes, I end up getting 8 or 7.5, so I rounded it up to 8, so I have a little bit more than 24. And then I make sure that it says make frame animation, and then I'm going to say OK. And it might take a minute. OK. So a couple of things happen here. And depending on what your settings might be, I'm not sure if everyone is going to have this timeline automatically pop up. But what this has done is this has now converted 180 frames of video into 24 frames that are, each of them is a layer in Photoshop. And so I'm playing through this using this tab. If that tab didn't open up for you, you can look at these, you can open it by going to Window and going down to Timeline. If you are in an earlier version of Photoshop, it's going to say Animation and it's going to be up here. But for the newer versions of Photoshop, yeah, you're going to select Timeline. And then you can go through here and click through all these different frames, and you end up having this file that has all of these 24 frames. Oh, I guess I ended up with 22. Oh, okay. I should have rounded down. So instead of going to 8, I should have gone down to 7. So I'm going to have to redo that and put in 7 so that I end up having at least 24 frames to work with. And so then I'm going to go and try and find my Layers tab, which is missing. And this is the other important thing. So for now, you don't need to know any of this. You don't need to use any of this bottom timeline yet. You are going to have to in later steps. But for now, you just know that it is there. And if you want to play through it, you can press this little play button and then you're able to see how your animation is going to look. And it's going to look a little bit choppier than it did as the video because it has less frames. So the other thing that is important for this, and this is how you're going to be working with these stills to begin with, is this is actually where each of these frames of image are in their own layer. And if you want to access them, you can come over here and just use the eye to look at each of them. And you're going to be copying and pasting from Photoshop into Illustrator to use these frames. So I just want to remind everyone that when you're copying and pasting, remember you need to be, not only do you need to see whichever layer, the layer that you're trying to copy and paste needs to be visible, you also want to make sure that it's selected. And that is going to be probably something that comes up, but I'll get into that a little bit in the next step. But for now, just make sure that you know that this timeline here, this is different than, so the timeline on the bottom is different than selecting the layers. It seems like you're selecting the layers with this, but it's not actually the case. This is what is telling Photoshop how to animate this, and we'll go into this later on. So you don't really need to be messing around with this right now. You do want to make sure that, actually you don't even need to worry about that. Yeah. So where you're going to need to be working in for the next couple steps is just using these different layer tabs. Okay, so make sure to save your Photoshop file as a Photoshop file, and then you're going to open Illustrator, and then we're going to move on to step 2.